Hello friends, this is Charles with HomeSmart and this ScottsdaleLife.com. Most of us have pretty much accepted these incessant, never-ending, tricky phone calls that we get multiple times a day trying to sell us something or ask us something. We just feel kind of helpless. We look at our phones. They're tricky with the phone number, so you never know if it's a friend or a client, so you answer only to be frustrated. Well, Tammy and I were lucky enough to meet and spend some time with two amazing attorneys, Russ Thompson and Amaret Rinkleib of the Thompson Consumer Law Group, and we got to ask them some questions that would interest consumers, which again is all of us, but we got to ask them questions about those annoying robocalls that we get every single day. And did you know there's a law? And that there's a law with teeth? Watch this. Okay, I am still with Russ Thompson with the Thompson Consumer Law Group. I will not leave because there's so much good information here. I see security gathering outside the door, but this is one question that I think everyone can relate to. So 30 times a day, my phone buzzes and I take a look at it, and it is a call from Shreveport, Louisiana, or Austin, Texas, or Bangor, Maine. And I don't know anybody there, but as a realtor, we have a lot of clients that are here from out of state, so I have to answer the phone. And invariably it is a computer, or it's nothing, or I answer and they hang up, and there's times I've called it back and there isn't even a warm body that answers the phone. What are our rights? What can we do? And is there really a way to stop it?
So the first thing is you're of course not alone. It's not only realtors and consumers, I get them as well. I've received at least 3 calls already this morning from numbers, like you said, from out of state, from places where I don't know people. And occasionally I get a phone call with the same area code, the first 3 numbers, and it shows like the call's coming from right down the street. And like you said, you answer the phone, there's nobody there. In those instances, a lot of times, unfortunately, there's very little that you can do because they are scams. They are people calling from either other countries and using computers to what's known as spoofing, which is making the number show up as whatever number they desire it to be. But there are cases where we can help and where consumers can get help, and that's because there's a statute known as the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. It's a statute that governs calls that are placed using an auto dialer or placed with an artificial or pre-recorded voice, known as auto dialers, and again, robocalls is another common term that people are used for it. So where the company is legitimate, the statute says that they have to have what's known as prior express consent to place these calls to your phone. Essentially, they have to have permission. If you've had an account with a creditor and it ends up with a debt collector and you've provided a phone number, oftentimes the courts will say that you've given them consent, but that doesn't mean that their consent is indefinite. All you have to do is tell them, stop calling me, and they have to stop robo-dialing you. Now they can still what's known as manual dialing, like we think of picking up the phone, pressing the numbers and calling you, but they can't set you up on their computerized system to call you 3, 4, 5 times a day, every single day of the week, Saturdays, Sundays, holidays. The statute stops them from doing that if you've revoked consent or if they never had it to begin with. A place we see it often is people get new cell phone numbers and they're getting calls for the previous person because that person owed a debt, that person signed up for something. Exactly. And those are very common, and those still violate the TCPA, the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, because they might have had the consent of the person before you, but they don't have your consent. We've seen cases where people answer the phone and they tell them, stop calling me, this is my child's phone, this is a new phone number. And the people say, sure, we'll take you off their list. The next day, what happens?
Happened to me.
The phone rings again. So you probably had a potential case under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. The statute itself is a very helpful statute because it provides for $500 to $1,500 per call.
Ooh.
You can see how quickly those calls add up, especially if they're calling you 3, 4, 5 times a day. You can end up with hundreds or thousands of calls over the length of time where you're filing a lawsuit. And fortunately, the statute has what's known as the statute of limitations, which is the time you're allowed to file a lawsuit, is 4 years.
Oh my gosh, so you could really build up a nice little... So let's say they got me just angry enough where I said, I'm going to take it to the next step. is it a good idea to just kind of keep a little notebook next to you and write down when you get the phone calls and take maybe a screenshot?
Of course, yeah. The thing I always suggest on screenshots is because people take them right away, but if you look at your cell phone, it just says today, yesterday.
Oh, you need the date.
So wait a few days so that the date shows up and the date and time. Or like you said, keep a little journal, handwriting the calls. Even the phone records from your phone company are not as helpful most times as people would think, because if you stop answering the phone, oftentimes calls that are missed won't show up if they're not answered.
I got it.
You only see the calls that you've answered and the calls that you've placed. So even if you subpoena the phone company, you're not keeping track of all these calls, and at $500 to $1,500 per call, you certainly want to keep track of every single call.
Oh, yes, you do.
Exactly. The other thing we always suggest to people is save the voicemails. If you are keeping a notebook, keep track of the call, what happened during the call. So in the case where you did exactly what you just said, you answered the phone, you told them it's the wrong person, you gave them your information, I suggest writing down the phone number if the representative gave you their name, the name of the person that they were calling for, and what you told them. You decide to come to us, we sign you, we file a lawsuit. It could again be another 2 or 3 years by the time your case makes it to trial,
right?
And you're not going to necessarily remember. So those notes help you remember what you said, when you said it. Again, with saving the voicemails, that helps us prove that the call was pre-recorded, that the call was an auto dialer.
Makes the phone call seem a little bit funner now. Now, when they call me, I'm going to take a look and go, $500 to $1,500.
So in most cases, in order to get it tripled up to the $1,500, there has to be a willful violation. So that's, again, you've told them to stop calling 3, 4, 5 times, and they keep doing it. They have records of this. That shows that they're willfully violating the statute. They know they're calling the wrong person, but they don't care. We've seen a case where our client had the cell phone for 10 years. She's had the same number for 10 years, and all of a sudden started getting phone calls from a creditor that were auto-dialed for a debt that was due. Turns out that somebody signed up for the account 12 years ago, had been paying the entire time, and only recently stopped paying and never updated their phone number. So even if you think you've had your phone a long enough time that you're not going to get those calls, you never know when they'll start in again.
Wow, well that is really interesting, and now I see a little bit more depth behind that phone ringing, and it makes a difference. Thank you so much. That's very valuable information. And again, Russ Thompson with the Thompson Consumer Law Group, and look them up. We're very thankful that they gave us their time today, and we'll talk to you soon.